Welcome, everyone. We're still a couple seconds early, but good to see everyone's name in a list. So I know that's not that much, but it's nice. So if you guys do have any immediate questions based on the practice test experience, any thoughts about it, anything, just any feedback on taking a practice test, feel free to chat it or unmute. There's not that many of us. But hopefully that was an eye-opening experience. We'll talk a little bit about that and what to expect for the next one. But yeah, share any thoughts you have, and then we'll talk about where we go from here. This is our fourth class. This is our halfway point through the SAT class, and we've got exactly 1 month till the August SAT. Is that right? August 23rd, right? Yeah. So exactly 1 month till the August SAT. So this is, as they say, crunch time. So hopefully we've been crunching for a while now, but if not, time to kick it in gear. Let's see here. Again, if there's any questions about practice tests, please let me know. To sum up what we talked about last week, before we get into some questions for this week, remember that everyone should have entered whatever practice test results they did have on my site. So if you haven't done that, you make sure you do. So that way you have just a way to keep track of it. So it's at this scores tab, and then you can just hit enter practice test results. And we have the practice test instructions if we need those again for future exams, for future practice tests. And so once you do that, you should get something that looks like this. And if anyone has any feedback on that process, I'm always open to ways to improve the site. I hope it's pretty smooth and self-explanatory entering all the information in here, but it makes sense to me. It doesn't mean it makes sense to everyone. So if there's an area of improvement or confusion, let me know. But ideally, if you took your practice test, it shouldn't really look like this anymore. We should have all the questions look like this one with this black review box, because that means we watched the video for that particular question. So some of the tests have this big button at the top that allows you to watch me take the test for the first time. That's a valuable thing. It's not the best way to review a test, but it is valuable as we get closer to the August SAT. Depending on where your scores are and what your weaknesses are, it might be good to watch me do at least like the hard modules from a test that you've already taken so that you can see how quickly I move through things and decide what I'm going to do to solve questions. We're going to try to talk a lot about that tonight. That's our theme for tonight. But ideally, you'd be looking at these individual questions, and when you open them up, it should look like this, where you have the ability to watch the video, and you should have been watching the videos for everything you got wrong and everything that you bookmarked. So once you hit it, you'll see here, see how it's gray right now. If you watch the video, if you click play, boom, turns black or dark blue, whatever color that is. And that is a way to keep track of things, because it's understandable if you don't want to review everything in one sitting. That is a lot of me, I admit. One thing you can do to speed it up a little bit is remember YouTube and pretty much any video player is going to have a playback speed. I watch myself on double speed all the time, and it's anytime I hear myself on regular speed, I sound weird. So it's whatever is you're comfortable with. I totally understand, but that might be a good way to get the review in a little bit faster. But the idea is you're looking at each of these questions, whether you got them right or wrong, to see if there's a way to do them better, right? So why, even if we got it right, did we bookmark it? Why did we think that maybe there was something difficult about it? Maybe we got lucky. Maybe it was literally a lucky guess on a question. Maybe there's something that we could have seen, especially in a passage question like this one, to have made the process simpler, to make us a little bit faster. So that's where we are, is trying to find ways to refine our process. Hopefully, we know the main strategies at this point, and the main things to memorize. We'll do a few more memorization things today as well. But any opportunity to streamline your process is a potential 10 points. And just to put things in perspective too, remember, I didn't expect improvement on this first test. So this was just a coincidence, the sample one worked this way. But even still, this would not be a bad result. This 1170 coming from a 1200. That's okay, because this first test is you trying things out in a way that's different from your normal way of solving things. So it takes time to get used to stuff. Hopefully, you found some opportunities on this practice test to plug points into equations, to use dumb summaries, to use some grammar rules that you had never really thought about before instead of just following your instincts. All that stuff is really great. that's going to get easier and easier the more you force yourself to do it. So if you did go down a little bit, not a big deal. If you went up, great. If you stayed the same, totally fine. That is very normal for the first practice test, and we're moving at that normal pace. Now, for the next practice test, if you don't improve, that's when we start ringing those alarm bells, right? Because in theory, you are much more comfortable and a lot more. So we should at least be seeing like 30, 40, 50 points of improvement, ideally more, but we should start to see that number tick up for that second practice test, which we will be taking after next class. This class, we're going to do more of the topics, and next class, we'll do some more as well. And then by then, we should be really comfortable and ready for our second practice test. Again, if there's any questions about this schedule, plan, how the practice tests work, fit into the plan, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Feel free to chat or whatever. Um, but continuing into the next steps of the plan, if we go to our practice tab here, we are on week 4, or step 4. If X, then Y. So we'll talk about what that means, but basically, this is where we want to start tapping back into our robot brain, right? We use the strategies to rewrite some of our programming, right? Our math teacher taught us well to do a lot of algebra and solve things a certain way, but then Desmos shows up, and suddenly we just have to force ourselves into a new habit of using Desmos in lots of cases, or plugging points into equations instead of writing equations from scratch. Those are classic examples where we're trying to rewrite the programming that our teachers have implemented in our brains for however many years. But now we want to get back into that robot brain, but with new ideas, new ways of thinking. And these are going to be a lot of topics where as soon as you see them on the SAT, you want to execute a clear plan. We'll see how there's still variety in the questions, but we want to execute the same plan over and over again. So by the end of this week, so by next class, this is a lot. This is a long list of things. I admit, this is like 200 questions. This is insane. So your goal is not necessarily to finish all of this list, okay? It is to start picking and choosing things that maybe you had some trouble with on the practice test, or maybe that just even interest you, because eventually you will get to all these exercises. A lot of them are going to reappear as we get to steps 5, 7, 8, those kinds of things. So I'll put this in the homework assignment is really, I would say if you can get to at bare minimum 5 of these, but more like 10 of these, that would be a success for this week. So try to do that. And you might even see that some of them you've already done. Apostrophes, I think, is back here in essential memorization, where we should have done this the previous week. Now, this is my account, so that's why it's not done. But it basically, yes, we want to start really checking these things off. If you haven't completely finished step 1 stuff, that's not really great. Step 2 is longer, but you really want that stuff all done as well. And step 3, remember, was just the practice test. So hopefully that's all done. And then we'll see some of these things return. That also reminds me, I do peek sometimes at what you guys are doing and working on. And one thing I notice is a lot of you are redoing the same exercise over and over again, like 2 or 3 times. You don't have to do that. You don't have to get 100% on everything. My advice is do it. Watch the videos to review the questions that you get wrong, the questions that you bookmark and have some trouble with, and then move on. Because like I said, these things are gonna reappear when we go to step 7, step 8, and we're coming back. Plus, you can always access them if you want by filtering by a different category. So if you want to retry some grammar rules, you can do that and go back and do the grammar. So you don't have to perfect everything. You can learn it, absorb as much as possible. If you get to sometimes in some of these harder rules, 60% understanding, 70% understanding of what's going on, that's a success. And you can build towards 80, 90, 100% later on. So it's okay to take it piece by piece. That's why these things are all separated out into smaller groups, because if we just took a practice test every week, you'd be overwhelmed with information. So in between the practice tests, we do all this little tweaking of particular topics. So yeah, don't feel that pressure to max everything out. You don't have to do that. It's not like a good Pokemon got to catch them all situation. Cool. Any questions before we get to work on some actual questions? Okay. All right. Then let's get into it. And like I said, our plan for today is if X, then Y. There's going to be certain things that if you see them on the test, as soon as you see these topics, as soon as you see these things, we have to have an instant reaction and a predictable reaction. And so we'll go back and forth today. We'll start with math because this is the easiest place for me to first make this point, but then we'll go to reading where it's actually a little harder to implement some of these ideas, but really important to. If we can do that, we will start to see really good improvement in our scores. So let's start with a percentages question. Let's see if this works. If you go to this to television, as always, it should change over in a second to this. There you go. Price of a movie ticket. So to me, this is a fairly basic question, but you might not have a way to solve these that's pretty good yet. So just do what you normally do. Let's see how it compares, and then I'll show you my way. And remember, feel free to bookmark questions. Make this a little bigger. That seems good. There are many ways to solve this. So if you're not sure what I'm hinting at is our kind of like our why in this case, that's okay. You might have some other clever way to do it. But I can fill that out. And maybe some of you have encountered this already as you were reviewing parts of the test, because there are definitely percentage questions all over the SAT. There are also places where people tend to fall in those problem solving and data analysis categories, and they tend to be places where people do not notice that they're falling for traps. And this is why we're thinking in terms of this, like if I see a percentage question, then one aspect of it is I just got to know to be nervous, right? So there's already a nervousness that I'm always bringing in to a percentage question. I don't care whether it's supposed to be an easy one or a hard one or whatever. We've got to make sure we're nervous because we're just, for whatever reason, humans are not good at thinking about percentages very well. I remember back when like COVID was just like a minor news story and it was just like whispers of this thing in China or wherever it was, Italy, I think for a little bit too. It wasn't really a big deal. And I was sitting on the beach here in LA with a friend and she was like, well, what's the big deal? Like it only kills like 1% of people. That's not that much. And I remember saying, yeah, but if it's super contagious and there's 300 million people in the United States, 1% of that is 3 million people. That's a lot of people to die. And she's smart. She was an applied math major at college where at Hopkins. So she knows math, but it just goes to show how our brains are not going to handle percentages really well. And so it turned out, yeah, obviously 1% wasn't a good number no matter what. But it goes to show too that we are all fallible. And so we need ways to avoid these traps. So the open formulas are how I use an equation to make sure that I do not make mistakes on percentage questions. So every time I see I have like a decision tree, there's two open formulas. There's one that looks like the word open. That's why these are called this. And it has the original amount times a percentage is equal to a new amount. And then we have another one that looks like that and is slightly different. It has this one plus or minus piece. So every single time I see percentages show up on the test, I'm always going to think, which of these two formulas do I use? This first one is when I'm taking a percent of something. And this is how most of you think about percentages, is you're taking 10% of some number. But what we need to make sure we are thinking about is this is not a percent of, this is a percent change, right? They're talking about a 10% increase. So lucky for me, I can just plug things in. And so now I'm back to my normal plug points into equations as well. And the key is that the O stands for, I'll write it here, I have more space. The O is the original amount, the P is the percent, and the N is the new amount. So when I'm plugging in, I have to really think, what do I have? What do I want? Right? So they say, what was the original price of the movie ticket? So when I'm using this formula, because it's a percent increase, or in this case, percent decrease, 10% discount, right? 10% discount, I am going to think, all right, that means my original is my X. I don't know that. But a discount, this is the best part of the formula, is it's very by the book, is a minus, right? This is a plus or a minus depending on the situation. So I'm thinking through each piece of this, and the formula forces me to think it through. So 1 minus, and the P is my percentage as a decimal. So that's 0.10, 10%. And that equals 1476. And so I can simplify. So this becomes 0.9, and that's 1476. And notice I end up doing something with my percent that's not what I normally associate with percentages. We associate percentages with multiplication, but I end up dividing. And in this case, if I do it correctly, I get 1640 as my answer. 1640, not 1624. It's close. It's close, but it's not quite the same. And this is why we have to be really careful that every time we see percentages, we use the open formula rather than trying to figure it out in the moment based on the situation. The formula keeps us focused on the right things because what many people are going to do is they're going to use a version of this other formula and they're going to take 10% of the 1476, which is conveniently $1.48 roughly. And then they're going to add that back to the 1476. So 1476 plus the $1.48. Someone can check my work if I'm wrong, but that's 4 and that's 2 and that's 6. And there it is, 1624. So percents are not reversible. That's the problem that we face. And we think they should be, right? We think, okay, what's the difference? If I take some number and take 10% off of it, I get 1476, right? So if I take 10% of 1476 and put it back on, I should get back to where I started. But it doesn't work like that because we're dealing with multiplication and division, not addition and subtraction. But it's hard to wrap our brains around that. And so again, I don't open the door to a trap at all. I know they're trying to trick me every time I see percents. So every time, if I see percents, then I'm using these open formulas. It's very robotic. I don't, even if it looks like an easy question, I do not trust myself. And this is an easy question. So if you got it wrong, it's not to make you feel bad. It's just to say we're all susceptible to this. But we luckily have this kind of thing to help us out. So in this case, we're using this one because it's a percent change. If they used an of, we might have to use the other one. I have a whole lesson on this. So this is the kind of thing where like these classes are really great. I'm going to try to give you an overview of some big picture ideas. But if you want to truly learn this stuff, guess where it is? Step 4. There we go. Percents basics. It's all about the open formulas. So this is where you want to spend some time. I would say this one is a high priority for this week than these percents. We have a percent twist that's going to come later when these things get harder, but at least learn the formula in the basic version. Are there any questions on it now? We're going to do more of it. But is there any question about this kind of quick version that I'm giving you? Feel free to ask. Okay. Now I'll write the open formulas for this next one. Here we go. It's going to switch over. And again, this is an if I see percents, I'm instantly trying to use the formula. So we have two versions, right? We have this basic version for when we do a percent of something. And then we have this other version, 1 plus or minus P equals N. And that's for a percent change. So usually the word than is going to appear, but it doesn't have to. It's basically some sort of changing in percent. Like we had a discount before, right? So that we were subtracting 10%. That's a change in percent. So your first choice is which one do I use? And then we see percents, stick to the formula. Turn my fan on while you guys work. So we're comparing an original value to a new value with the percent as a decimal. And the O and the P in the end mean the same thing in the other formula. So I just labeled it there because there's a little more space. I would also say not to rub it in if you're still thinking, but this is a question you'd really want to get right in under a minute. Under a minute. So let's do 10 more seconds and then lock in an answer, even if it's just a guess. All right. Let's see how we did. D is the answer. Now, why is this a 30-second, minute-long question? Because we're talking about an increase, right? Increase of percent, right? So my brain is instantly like, okay, I need this one, right? Increase, change in percent. And again, this becomes more and more automatic the more you practice with this formula. So what do I have? Well, they tell me the original amount is this X gallons. So that's my O. They tell me an increase by 260%. So one plus, right? It's an increase, very straightforward. And then my percent is, remember to move the decimal point two spaces. So 260% is 2.6 as a decimal, or 2.60 if we want to be thorough. And then they're asking, right, what's the new value? What's the amount after the rainstorm? So that's what we're looking for. And in terms of X is fine. But notice, all we have to do is add. 1 plus 2.6 is 3.6. So 3.6x is the new amount in the reservoir. That is it. Now, the trap answer is clearly C, right? Or maybe A or B are a little tempting too if we were just focused on the 60% and we're trying to work it backwards in some weird way. But the answer that most people pick, and they also pick it within 30 seconds, is C because they see 260%. They think this is just about converting a decimal to, or sorry, percent to a decimal. It's much more involved than that. I mean, with the formula, it becomes pretty straightforward, but the SAT is definitely setting these kinds of traps all throughout the math sections, especially in that middle zone of the hard module. Number 12 is what this feels like, a place where it's supposed to be hard, but we still might be able to get kind of lulled into a false sense of security based on the fact that, yeah, there are some easy questions still at the beginning of the hard module. So we might be celebrating the fact that this one feels so easy as we pick C and get it wrong. But with the formula, I don't have to think about it. If there's a percent thing, I am writing these open formulas on my page. I am plugging into them. I don't care how confident I feel in anything. I'm going for it. Any questions on this one? We're going to do one more percent before we move to reading. And can I just do something here? Let's see if this works. I don't want to have to write this again. Let's see if that's going to work. I don't think it is, but we're going to do it anyway. All right. So let's do one more. This one is I'm going to give you more time on because it's a lot more going on. But in terms of that if then kind of thing, it's percents. It's so if percents, then open or open. And there's another if then that I want to use here. something that's obvious to me and should be obvious to anyone who's been really practicing those strategies. Let's see if anyone knows what I'm talking about. Give some hints, or I can ask us to at least increase our odds. There is a very clear trap answer if we think about how the SAT works, and we know that this is hard. Many of you have already bookmarked it, which is great. It's definitely hard, but there's definitely a clear trap answer that I would want everyone to avoid. If you think, feel free to chat it. That's one thing. So maybe there's two of these if thens. If, I don't know, hard, then avoid easy answers. Talk about that. But if you are having trouble, especially if you can't really feel like you can't get started here, think about why. The more you can specify the specific thing that you are confused by, the better. That's it's hard for me to explain it further than without giving it away, but it's a lot of times when I'm working with someone and they're struggling on a question, they'll just be like, I'm confused. And the best way to get out of that confusion is to specify what is it you are confused by? What is the specific aspect of the problem? What's the thing that if you could change it, if you could make it different, and what would you wish you had to make the question easier? If you have a wish, again, feel free to chat it. You might be right. That's the thing to get. If we're missing numbers, right? If we're asked to change the numbers of spoons. If we're missing numbers, then what do? Arithmetize. I'm curious if you did that, if you arithmetized, if you made up your own numbers here, feel free to take credit. That is excellent. The goal would be that you would recognize that this question is hard because they're asking you to change values without giving you the values. They're asking you to compare values without giving you the values. And the thing that they want at the end is the relationship between numbers. But again, we don't have the numbers. So, oh my gosh, this would be so much easier if I had the numbers. If I don't have the numbers, if they're talking about changing something hypothetically, then what am I going to do? I'm going to arithmetize. I'm going to make up my own numbers. I am going to say that this weird factory makes 100 spoons in January. Why? Because, well, then it's real lazy and easy to go from January to February. Because then when I have to increase the total production by 32%, I don't really have to think about it, right? What's an increase of 32%? Well, it gets me to 132. That's the beauty of 100 spoons, right? Is that at least that step I don't have to think about. Now I could do the math there, right? Because I could use this open formula, the change one, right? The original number is 100, and then I'm adding 32%, so that's 0.32, and that's giving me my February number, right? So 100 times 1.32 is 132. So there you go. That's nice and easy. And then we can do the same thing for March because now this next step isn't so bad either. In March, the factory produced 8% fewer spoons. So this one I'm not going to try to do in my head because that's confusing. So let's just say now our original value is 132 because that's the February number. And then notice before I said the word than is really important when we're talking about the percent change, the open formula about the change. And the than is also pointing us to our original in the same way that the word of kind of points us to our original in the other formula. So we'll actually use that other formula, but first we got to use this one. So the 132 is my new original for this February to March transition. And now it's a subtraction because it's a loss, fewer spoons. And so we are losing zero point zero 0.08. And that is going to give me 132 times this becomes 0.92. So I forget what this is. So I'm going to do it with my calculator. 132 times 0.92 is 121.44. Now I know that you can't have 0.44 of a spoon, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to leave it like that because I just want to see the numbers work. I don't really even care too much about the logic of the situation. It's probably not 100 spoons the factory is making. It's probably like 100,000 spoons or something crazy. So I'm good with it. But now I have numbers for January, February, and March, and they're asking me to compare, right? But this is where we again have to be careful. And this is why if it's a hard question, we should avoid easy answers. I'm skeptical even of all the stuff that I see so far. So the easiest answer here is choice B, right? Some of you are just going to say, okay, 32 minus 8 is 24, right? It increased 32, it went down 8. That's a difference of 24 total. No freaking way is this question going to be that easy. And that sense of danger and the fact that you might be getting scammed, that sense is really important for the SAT. If it's supposed to be a hard question, then it's probably not going to have an easy, obvious answer. And even if you have no idea what to do, if you just eliminated B here, that's a success. You definitely don't want to pick that, and you can guess randomly from what's left. Now, a lot of these other choices look tempting, right? 121.4 or just 21.4. Which one is the percent, right? Because it looks like since we picked 100, it's pretty easy to see that's a 21.4% increase roughly. But again, percentages are really annoying. We got to be really careful with what they're asking. In this case, they're saying January was P% of the total number produced in March. So the of here is doing a lot of work. It is telling us that we need this version of the open formula because now we are not taking an increase or a decrease. We are just talking about a normal percent. And the of is telling me that March is my original, which I know makes no sense because you're like, well, January comes first. Why are we putting March first as the original? It's just the way the SAT is asking it. They're doing it on purpose because they know that's counterintuitive. So 121.44 is my original. I don't know the value of P. That's what they're asking for. And weirdly, 100 is my value of O. And all of this is going to get us to choice C, which is the one that looks the least likely, because what we're going to end up doing is dividing by 121.44, 121.44. It's going to come out to 83 or 82.3 and some change, but it's actually going to come out to 0.823. And so we have to remember sometimes this matters for these questions, especially when it's a free response question where you have to enter the answer. Look at the way they're using the word P or the letter P in this. It's different from the way that I'm using P in my version of the formula. In my version, P is a decimal version of the percentage. In their phrasing here, it's not 0.82%, it's 82% or 82.3%. So we have to realize that sometimes percents are annoying because we talk about them as numbers out of 100, but we mathematically work with them as numbers out of 1. And once you get used to that, like it's one of those mistakes that if you make it on a test, you won't make it again. And so that's kind of why I incorporated it into this question. I wrote this one, but it is based on lots of stuff I've seen on the test. So I'm trying to cram in as much information as possible for you guys so that you see all these different ways the SAT is messing with you. But at the end of the day, even though this is a hard question, this is not one that I would be marking for review if I saw it on a test, because every step of the way I was very robot brained. I know this formula works. I'm plugging things into an equation. That's always a very safe place to be. And so I'm moving through it in a very robotic way. I'm not thinking about the story in any higher level way, trying to understand how these spoons are made. It doesn't matter to me. But there's a lot of great things here. And I would say, too, as a bigger picture than just the percentages, this idea of like specifying the problem is really useful when you get down to a hard question, you're confused. If you're confused, try to don't just say I'm confused, don't just say this is hard. Try to think what specifically is making it hard. I know how to take percentages. I know that. So why can't I take this percentage? Well, because there's nothing to take a percentage of. I need the numbers. So therefore I'm going to make them up. And it's all sorts of places in the SAT. That idea, just asking yourself that question, what's getting in the way? What's getting in the way of me solving? That's going to help you get through it. Any questions on percentages? We're going to take a break from math for a little bit. We're going to do some reading, but we will come back. I do have some other math I want to make sure I talk about at the end. You guys are awfully quiet tonight. Not that we're particularly chatty normally, but I'm assuming it's just deep focus and everything like that. But a bunch of you changed your answers to this. There was no way there was this many right answers to this when I was looking at it before. A bunch of you changed them right as I snuck in with that. That's fine. All right, let's look at this then. Okay, this is a vocab question. And this also has that kind of if then kind of thing. So I will fill that in, but I'll give you a chance to think about it yourselves and let's see. You might already be thinking about some important pieces as you go. Remember, dumb summaries can help, connotations can help. Those are all things that help us understand the passage. So my if then here would be if there's negative words in the passage, I'm probably going to go to my scratch paper. As I read this, there's certain things that stand out to me as soon as I read it, even before I start solving. Film scholars have long maintained that musical scores in cinema are rarely blank. Ooh, we got a negative word, rarely, right before the blank. That might affect what I'm thinking versus what I need to put in that blank, right? So that's a word that negates things. That's why I say negative words. It's flipping the meaning of things. Going on, the continued popularity of the theme from Chariots of Fire undermines another one, right? Undermines. We've got another potential thing that's trying to distract me from what the passage is really saying. It undermines this conventional wisdom. Then, this isn't a negative word really, but the colon stands out to me in any vocab question because a colon is signaling some sort of repetition, right? It's telling me I'm about to repeat an idea. So now we have another thing that's getting into this, like, what's the logic of the passage, right? That is it flipping things? Are there contradictions? Are we repeating ideas? Are we going to need synonyms? And then we say, I don't know how to say this guy's name. Vangelis' iconic instrumental piece is frequently heard in other media, while few people can link it to the movie that originated it. So the while is maybe playing into this as well. It's just, there's a lot here that before I even start to dissect what's going on makes me nervous. And this gets to the same thing we talked about with percentages, is a lot of success on the SAT isn't really coming down to learning new things, learning new facts, new formulas, new vocab words. It's coming down to understanding the twists and turns that the SAT is inserting into basic stuff to make it seem less basic, to get you confused. So we have to tune our brain into noticing those things. So here, I might use my scratch paper because I need to know what's going on, right? So what is the conventional wisdom, right? I want to know that. That's what I'm going for here. Conventional wisdom. That's what the scholars believe. And they say something like music rarely blank the movie. Okay. But what is this other guy? What is this Chariots of Fire? Chariots of Fire, what's that all about? Right? Okay. Well, they're saying it undermines this conventional wisdom, so it's the opposite in some way. And this iconic instrumental piece is frequently heard in other media while few people can link it to the movie that originated it. So few people can link it. The Chariots of Fire thing is not linked in some way. Okay. And this is, I'm writing more than I would on the actual test. So a lot of this I could kind of hold in my head, but, or use other ways to symbolize it, but trying to do it. So the conventional wisdom is undermined by this. So I want to say that the, I guess the conventional wisdom is that it's linked, right? That music is linked to the movie. And so I almost want to flip that again and say it's rarely not linked, right? This is where this gets really crazy because it seems like I want to say the opposite of this. And yet, because of this word rarely, I need to say the same thing. It's so bizarre. This is not something that most human beings can hold in their head without getting it confused. So these are cases where, again, like the percentages where you know they're messing with you, you got to notice these words and start to say, like, okay, I'm not going to let them get me, right? I'm going to be especially cautious. So here, okay, if I'm picking words and I'm trying to think, okay, does something here mean it's not linked to the movie status, right? The musical score is rarely not linked, or I'm trying to say that it is linked. It's so confusing. But the answer here is a word that I might not pick. The word is severable, meaning to sever, to break, right? So this is to me very hard on my brain because I still, even as I'm trying to explain it to you guys, I'm having trouble with it. But let me try my best here. Feel free to ask questions. This is just very twisted. So they're saying the scores are rarely separatable from a movie status as a timeless classic, meaning if they're rarely separatable, it's a similar word, but it's a slightly different one. They're rarely separatable, then that means that they go together, right? They're linked. They're commonly linked together. And so we think of a movie, we think of the score that goes with that movie. But the Chariots of Fire theme is undermining that claim. It is providing an example where the song is not linked to the movie, right? Because few people can link it to that movie. Chariots of Fire is not some classic that everyone is rushing to stream on Netflix or anything like that, but I guarantee you've heard that instrumental version in tons of comedies and all over the place. They play it like during Olympics and things like that. It's a classic sports theme. And so that's what they're going for. And it's a very simple idea, right? It's here's what some people believe, but here's a counterexample. But they did such a crazy job of kind of twisting things up in here. And it's not going to be something that you can just intuitively grasp in most cases. Now, some of you did get it right, so that's awesome. But more of you got it wrong, which tells me that, like, yes, this is twisted, this is confusing. And it's still hard, even when we do use our scratch paper or try to untwist these weird negative words. But a lot of it just comes down to understanding connotations again, right? This word rarely is going to flip whatever's in that blank. And so that's why I'm writing this as like a double negative here. Let me know if we have questions. This is tough. This is tough. But my hope is that, again, we're trying to get to this kind of if-then place where sometimes, yes, we are able to trust our instincts when we're doing these vocab ones, but we start to turn it into kind of a robot thing where we're also scanning the passage as we read it, and certain words like rarely, like undermine, these words are popping out. Even the colon, which does repeat things, that's repeating the undermining of the claim, but those are things that would stand out to me. They're much more important than any of the details of the passage. They're telling me about the logic of the sentence, what's related, what's different, that kind of stuff. Any questions on this? This is a mess, but this is what we're up against, certainly in the hard module for reading. Okay, and let's do a passage. I think this passage is actually easier than this question, but again, we want to link things. We want things to be certain. There are definitely words, a bit in the passage, but more so in the choices here that I would want you to notice instantly. It doesn't necessarily mean a choice is automatically right or wrong, but it's something that you would notice and really fixate on. So that's my if then here is in general, if there are certain strong words, then we need to be skeptical of those choices. Skeptical. Good. I see people crossing things out. That's awesome. Definitely take advantage of that cross-out feature on the real test. That's such a good example of like, let's not hold ideas in our head of what we're crossing out. Let's just get on the page. Yep. And even if you guys are confident in your answer, that not to say that you're wrong, but just I would love it if you take a look at the wrong answers and think, why did I cross it out? What's the one word or two words? What's standing out as those strong words that are good examples that make this wrong, right? Regardless of the content of the passage, that really make it sketchy. And that's what we're trying to do. So I'm going to write some words for each choice as we go through it. It would be a really good sign if for each choice, the words that you think are important are also the words that I think are important. That's a really good sign we're thinking about things the same way. All right. Well, I am going to read it really fast just to because I want to give you a sense of what other words in the passage also stand out to me as I'm reading, just so you can get in that habit as well. This is the kind of thing you'll definitely see when you watch my videos of any of the passage-based homework assignments. So, biologist Hilda Roon has spent 3 years observing the social behavior of central bearded dragons in their native Australian habitat. Her research focuses on a particular head bobbing display that these lizards perform when encountering other members of their species. Roon discovered that the rhythm and intensity of this head bobbing varies significantly So varies depending on the specific situation. Slow, deliberate bobs typically signal submission, while rapid, vigorous movements often indicate territorial aggression. However, that also stands out. Rune's most intriguing finding involves a third pattern, a moderate rhythmic bobbing that occurs when bearded dragons encounter unfamiliar lizards of similar size. This intermediate display appears to serve as a form of social assessment, allowing the lizards to evaluate potential threats or allies before committing to either aggressive or submissive behavior. So all of that, I promise you, the only two words that I noticed are it varies and there's a however. I don't even know how those two things relate and what my dumb summary would be here. I just get it. There's like different lizard things going on. There's a variety of head bobs, but other than that, all this stuff about the specifics of each type of head bob and when they use it, it's in one ear, out the other. You don't need to absorb that information. These passages do not disappear once you read them. If they ask about that kind of specific stuff, we can go back, but don't clutter your head with it. Words that indicate a but, a contrast, those words need to matter. And then this is just telling me something in a very dumb way about the bobs. Now I'd let the choices guide me. Like I get it. It's about the lizard thing. So let's see what the choices say. So choice A, bearded dragons frequently use head bobbing to establish dominance over other lizards in their territory. Well, they definitely talk about the dragons. They talk about the head bobbing. They did talk about dominance. I remember that, right? But the word frequently scares the heck out of me. They frequently do it? I don't know. Did they start clocking the time here? I don't think so. This is a bit of an issue. I'm not interested in how frequently something happens. This is also a bit of a quantifier. And we talked about these kinds of things, especially if you watched my lesson on the trap answers, as you should have done for the first week. That's one of my best lessons. We talk about different types of patterns that we see in answer choices that often indicate wrong answers. And so both this one word frequently, if I had never read this passage, it would be enough for me to be skeptical of the choice. I wouldn't eliminate it because there's still stuff to check, but I don't see anything that corroborates that. So there you go, one word. So hopefully some of you noticed that word too. B, Rune's research proves that bearded dragons are more aggressive than most other reptile species. Oh my God, this one's got a long list. So most of you are going to get something here. Proves bothers me. It gets the idea of necessity across, which makes me scared, right? Does it prove something? It's evidence of something, but I don't think it proves it. Are they more aggressive than others? That's a comparison. More aggressive, that's a comparison. And so that's another issue that happens in a lot of passages or a lot of wrong answers is, are we really comparing this bearded dragon to other reptile species? And there's another one, other species. This is getting into a kind of more vague reason to get rid of things, what I call big versus small. This is a very small passage. It's specific to this bearded lizard. I don't know about other reptile species. And as stupid as it is, the word other sometimes is enough for me to instantly be skeptical of a choice. I don't like that word. I don't like we're bringing in other things to a passage. So there's a lot here that really scares me. Plus the word most, which I've run out of space to write. That's another quantifier. I don't know if the majority of other reptile species do anything. So gone. C, bearded dragons use different head bobbing patterns to communicate various messages to other members of their species. Well, different aligns nicely with that varies. And notice this choice is very vague. It doesn't get into the different bobbing patterns. And some people might be bothered by that because they're like, well, I want it to be more specific. I want it to talk about the different patterns and this one that was a surprising finding about the third pattern. But this is what a lot of the main idea answers are going to be on these questions. They're vague. They don't say very much, which is why we don't want to waste brain power trying to absorb all those details. So I like this. I can't pick it quite yet. I'm going to highlight it, but we got to look at D and make sure. And right away, I have a problem. The majority of bearded dragons' social interactions involve complex behavioral displays that scientists have only recently begun to understand. Honestly, I like that choice, except for the word majority, right? It does seem like they're only beginning to understand it because they just had a third pattern that they had never thought about before, right? That's interesting. But I don't know if this head bobbing thing constitutes the majority of their social interactions. It's one behavior. I can't start to quantify things in this way. So even if you had never given me, and I know a lot of you got this right, so I think everyone got it right. So that's awesome. Congrats. But I'm hoping you're getting it right for similar reasons as I'm eliminating things here. It's great when we get an answer that we like and we're able to confidently pick it and be like, yeah, that's just what it says. But if we do that all the time, we will fall for traps because the SAT is really good at disguising right answers, disguising wrong answers, making them seem very similar. And so this other idea of proving answers wrong by finding these words is really important. And For the next one, if you want a little help, you might be able to get it. Some of you already have this on, but that training mode, if you turn that on, you'll get the little kind of set of potential trap answers, the categories that are here. Quantifying, comparisons, time, necessity, main character confusion. That's when it's just about something different, and the small versus big thing that I talked about. So these things are there. You eventually want to have this list almost memorized, not necessarily these words, but these words are there to help you understand the overall category. And these are things that even if you had never shown me this passage and asked me to pick an answer just based on the four answer choices, I would have picked C because of all of the strong words in the other choices. Not all of them are going to have that many obvious strong words, but it's a goal that we want. Is if I see these words, then I am skeptical of the choice. That's the takeaway from a question like this. So let me turn this back off so I have more space. And let's do a harder passage now. Yes, this one. And there are definitely things here that, as I see them in the passage, as I see them in the choices, are going to get me to do other behaviors. If, what did I say before? I think I said negate negative words, but let's just say twisted. If the passage feels twisted, if it feels like it's hard to follow, or if there's some clear idea that you want to make sure you're keeping track of, use the scratch paper. You've got it for reading on the real test. Just in case anyone missed it, the first clue that they're twisting things up is the question itself. Which finding from the researcher's study, if true, would most directly weaken the author's claim? Not support. That's what it usually says. Sometimes it says weaken. All right. Well, let's see. Again, I want you guys to start to be able to think like I do. I mean, I've wanted that for a long time and all sorts of things besides the SAT. More people to think like me, but at least let's start here. So, here's what we want to do is again, you got to let some of these details go in one ear and out the other. So I'll show you what I would be doing as I'm working on this. The authors of a recent popular science book argue that physical posture significantly influences memory recall performance. The authors claim that upright, confident postures, such as standing with shoulders back and chest open, can enhance cognitive function by increasing feelings of personal power and reducing stress hormones that typically interfere with memory retrieval. That's a long sentence, but upright posture is good. So that's the first thing here. My dumb summary is the upright posture is good. Let's keep it like that. So then to test this claim, researchers Vera whatever and Sheldon whatever conducted an experiment in which participants were randomly assigned to one of two conditions. Half were instructed to sit upright with their hands on their hips to keep their chest expanded, while the other half were told to sit hunched forward with their arms crossed and shoulders curved inward. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I can already see where this is going. All participants then watched a short film about a popular song. The researchers asked all participants the same questions about the film 1 minute after it ended, maintaining their assigned posture throughout the question and answer period. So we're contrasting, right? So upright is good. So that probably suggests that it's against the hunched, which is supposed to be bad. But then, of course, if we are going to be weakening that conclusion, then there's two ways to do that. We'd be saying that the hunch is good, but the upright is bad. So that's one way to go about it. So, right, if I weaken it, are we going to say the upright is bad? Maybe, right? And so that's what you might want to do. That's why the scratch paper is useful, is all that stuff we just read, we don't want to support it. So the thing that we're trying to like kind of learn and understand, we have to weaken it. So it's helpful to have the scratch paper just to keep track of it all. Our minds are going to be pretty full of stuff by this time of the SAT when we're hitting these passages. So let's look at the choices and see if we can maybe even dumb summarize them a little bit. So A, participants who are already familiar with the song featured in the film answered significantly more questions correctly, regardless of their assigned posture. So there's a lot in that choice, but honestly, the word that is strongest to me is this word regardless, because it is a word that tells me something doesn't matter. So this is saying posture doesn't matter. Now, I don't know if that's what I want, right? They're saying upright posture is good. Maybe this is a way of saying it's not, or I don't know, that it just doesn't matter at all what posture you have. I don't know. This isn't what I expected it to be, but it certainly is in this idea of if we're trying to compare the two postures, then this is saying there's no comparison. So I'm not picking it. I didn't mean to click it, but it's something I'm definitely going to keep around. Let's go to B. Participants who sat upright showed improved focus when answering questions about the film's musical elements compared to those who sat hunched forward. Well, this is a good example of why you gotta always read the question, because this is saying that the upright is good, right? The people who sat upright had improved focus, and especially compared to the hunched people, right? That's exactly what the claim was. But if we want to weaken the claim, this isn't doing it. This is supporting the claim. So they're going to do this. They're going to give you choices that, if you don't read the question, are really tempting and seem right. So hopefully, if you, it doesn't look like anyone picked that. So good. Maybe you switched it before I could check. But there you go. That's good. C, participants assigned the upright posture. Participants assigned the upright posture recalled fewer details about the film's dialogue. So that seems okay. So the upright is bad. Okay. While hunch participants scored poorly on questions about the film's visuals. Okay, I mean, the upright being bad, that kind of matches with what I thought before. This is saying the hunched is bad too. So that also, I don't know, if we want to weaken what we said before, then that seems to go along with it. So I don't know what this one's doing, but I'll keep it. And then D, participants in the hunched posture condition were more likely to report feeling distracted by background noise during the film, leading to lower overall recall scores. Well, in a dumb summary kind of way, this is also saying the hunched is bad, and it's bringing in this kind of main character issue of like, what about were they distracted by the noise? Who cares? What does that have to do with the posture? Right now, this is taking it away and making it about something else. But if I'm trying in the passage or in the summary, oh, so annoying. In the summary, if I'm trying to compare the two things, right, then it seems strange that this one doesn't compare them at all. So I would be down to A and C here. And this is a good example of something I think we talked about last time or the time before, the idea of the filter, right? This kind of idea that we had, this dumb summary was able to filter things out. We got two choices that neither is really perfect for what I expected, but maybe they have something going for them. And then I just need to maybe try to wedge them apart. What makes them different? So here we go. Participants who are already familiar with the song featured in the film answered significantly more questions correctly, regardless of their assigned posture. So again, this is saying the posture doesn't matter, right? That seems like it would weaken the comparison between the two, where we're trying to say one thing is better than another. This is saying no, there is no better. They're the same. They're regardless. That's a very important word. C, I like that it says that the posture people have are bad in some way, right? Fewer details about the film's dialogue. But notice that when it switches, when it does this comparison, it moves on to a different thing. Hunch participants scored poorly on questions about the film's visuals. So this is a comparison, but it's a comparison of the wrong thing, I think, because it's not saying that they're one is better than the other. They're saying they're both bad, and they're bad at different question types, which isn't really what I want. Now, I don't love that choice A brings in something that didn't come up in the passage either. Whether they're familiar with the song doesn't seem to be part of the passage, but I do like that regardless of their posture is getting to that. And that is the answer here. It's getting to the idea that we're trying to weaken or undermine a comparison between two things where we are saying one is better. So this is definitely a harder question, but I still feel like I'm using those trap answer choices. I'm still thinking about similar things. If I see a comparison, I'm going to make that comparison the focus of my dumb summary, the focus of my analysis of the choices. Now, before comparisons, I said were bad, but sometimes there are comparisons in the passage itself. And so that's why we can't just eliminate these kinds of things and just say, all right, well, if it contains one of these words from this list, I can just automatically can cross the choice out. To be clear though, sometimes I do that. Sometimes if I'm running out of time and I got like 10 seconds left on a passage question in the hard module and I just need to pick something, I am looking for these words. And if one choice has them, I'm crossing it out and going with the other one. It's a better bet. If you do that, I don't think you'll have a great score overall. And I don't think it works to that level of like perfection, but it is a good way to nudge you in the right direction if you're confused. Is certain words, certain ideas are usually a sign of a wrong answer. So that might be able to be something you can get rid of. But this takes practice. And this is why when you are doing passages in the homework portal and are on the practice test, you really do want to try to move away from that idea that your instincts are going to be enough to answer the questions. You can get a lot right just feeling your way to what feels right and wrong. But if you're only doing that, the SAT will trick you on enough questions. It's not possible to get like a 700 if you're just relying on instinct. I would even say the 600s can be difficult if you're just always going with what your instincts say and not thinking about the trap answers and the ways that the SAT is trying to trick you. You have to factor that into your process. So notice it. That's step one. Notice when they're twisting things up. Notice when the word weaken shows up in the choice, and we've got to reassess things. Are there questions, though, on this one? This is definitely hard. It might be one that I would bookmark as well, if it were me. Do we understand the logic? If not, feel free to ask. This is definitely a tough one. We are going to go back to math for the last little bit here, and I promise that'll be a little less twisted. Okay, cool. All right. Oh, then you know what? Actually, before we do, let me just say in here for this week's homework, if you wanted to do some of these things that we talked about, a lot of this is grammar. You can see here apostrophes, positives, conjunctions, things you might have already done. A lot of it is math, so that's good. These logically completes questions are really good for kind of that, like what we just did with the support and weaken, understanding the direction of the passage. These are really good for that kind of like dumb summary analysis. And then here, this twisted relationships is about the vocabulary. So these are all vocab questions, the one we did, where they're including those words that negate things and mess with the blank and stuff. So that's also really good for that. And if you do want to start targeting other questions, other types of questions, remember, you can also filter by category. Since this is a very busy week here, I didn't add in any of the College Board question bank sets. So you can see here, if I go to passages in the homework portal here, some of them are going to say written by Mike. I am Mike. Those are mine. Others will say question bank. Those are from the College Board. So even if you've done a lot of that question bank before, these questions, you can try them again now with this kind of more strategic approach. I actually think that these kind of here main idea questions are pretty good for dealing with those strong words and trap answer categories that we talked about. They tend to be pretty straightforward passages, but the answer choices also tend to have a lot of those common traps. So those are good too. But I didn't want to clutter things up. It's a lot already for this week to just look at. So we're getting to the point though where you can almost choose your own adventure in the portal and see like, okay, I want more practice with passages. Go here. That's great. Cool. Okay. Then let's do the math one. Where'd it go? All right. All right. I will help you a little bit on this one to get you started because this is a clear if then kind of thing. If they're talking about the number of solutions, then, like with the open formula, I have an initial choice I need to make. Is it a line or is it a quadratic? We're going to do both. I can't spell quadratic, but there it is. Is it a line or is it a quadratic or a parabola, right? If it's a line, we're going to have one set of things that we need to memorize and apply. If it's a quadratic, there's another set of things, but that first decision matters. So this is a case where it's a line, and the reason I know that is I don't see any x squareds, right? This is just a regular x, this is just a regular x. So it's pretty easy. So that's step one. And so once you make that decision, now we're on a path. With lines, basically our safe place, right? So another if then, if it's about lines, then y equals mx plus b is our safe place. We understand the world of lines when we have y equals mx plus b, okay? Now I don't see a y here, so that can throw people off. And when we're talking about solutions, this question is designed to make us think it's an algebra question. It's about the theory of algebra, but I really don't want to think about it that way. It's much better for us to think of a solution as what happens when two lines intersect. Okay, so there's really only three things that can happen when two lines intersect. They can have infinitely many solutions, zero solutions, or one solution. That's it. So infinitely many, none, and one, and these are going to be affected by how they show up in the two equations. So the two equations of the y equals mx plus b are going to have different properties, the things that we can compare, depending on whether we have one solution, zero, or infinitely many. So I keep saying two equations, but it looks like there's only one. I would say step one here is split them up. Treat it like two. Y equals 3, x plus 2 minus 7, and y equals 4 minus ax plus b. And your goal, if it's about lines, then, oh my God, my writing is terrible. Then get back to y equals mx plus b, because that is where we understand lines the easiest. So I'm leaving some stuff out. I do want to give you a chance. If you think you know what to do, go for it. If not, I'm going to write some stuff here, and that will hopefully give you some other ideas. But one thing you can do is you can probably see that these are not looking like y equals mx plus b. So you're going to have to make some changes there. So you could start on that at the very least. So no solutions. I would also say wrote this in a way that Desmos would be difficult to use here. I don't think it's gonna work in a very convenient way. So we are stuck doing the algebra, but I don't think the algebra is that hard. So if you're just playing around in Desmos, that might be a dead end. If you disagree with that, though, feel free to chat me. I'm curious. Someone sees something I don't. I see some of us are done. That's great. I'm going to try to help us along a little bit here. So you can see this little chart is giving us what we need. And this is something that I don't expect you to have completely memorized right now if you've never seen this before. But by test day, this is a topic that I guarantee you will come up on every SAT. That's why it's part of this if X then Y day. If we see that they're talking about the number of solutions, then we've got to have all the stuff memorized because we can get this question. This is a guaranteed medium to hard question right if we can memorize all this stuff. So the first thing I'd be doing is converting these to y equals mx plus b. And again, this is robot brain here. I know that I know the rules about these things. I'm looking for no solutions. So same slope, different y-intercepts. So I'm thinking about that. I might even write that on my scratch paper just so it's out of my head. So I need to get this into y equals mx plus b to understand that. So this first one isn't so bad. You would distribute the 3, and that would give me a 3x plus 6. And then I would merge the 6 and the negative 7. So I get y equals 3x. So again, this is 6 minus 7 is negative 1. So that's a line, right? Slope and y-intercept. Great. Now this is a little jumbled, and it's a little annoying because we got two missing pieces, the a and the b. So if I am going to try to write it as mx plus b, the negative ax is the slope, and then the y-intercept, I know b is what we say is the y-intercept, but the 4 is kind of part of this too. This is a classic SAT twist to things, right? Is they love using letters that we're familiar with, but then using them in their own way. So the entire y-intercept here is b plus 4. So we've got mx plus b. And so this b and this whole thing are both y-intercepts because that b is a number. We don't know what it is, but that b is a number and it has to combine with the 4 in some way. Now, when they're asking which of the following is not a possible value of b, that means that we're looking almost for the opposite of what it says. We want these y-intercepts to be different. So any number that gives me a number different from negative 1 is going to be good. So the number that won't work is the one that has the same y-intercept because that's going to mean we have infinitely many solutions instead. So this just basically allows me to focus on just one piece. I don't care about the a, I care about this. And I'm going to make a little mini equation because the y-intercept of the first equation has to equal b plus 4 because that would create this unwanted infinitely many solution situation. So I subtract 4 and I subtract 4, I get b is negative 5. It's a great example of a question that your first practice test, you're looking at this and you might have no clue what's going on. And I think everyone learns this in school at some point, this kind of these ideas about systems of equations of lines and how they interact, but it's not something you hold on to. It's a classic example of like, you study it, you take the test, you get a whatever grade, and then you never get any thought about it again. So you just delete it from your brain. I understand that. A lot of SAT topics are like that. But we need to bring it back at least for a little bit so we can get through these SATs because this will come up. There are lots of unpredictable things that we're going to see in the hard questions of the SAT. This is one of those predictable ones. They will word this a million different ways, this question, but the underlying content is the same. And your goal is to, again, bring it down to that kind of robot brain. If they're talking about the number of solutions for lines, you might be able to work a Desmos solution. You might be able to do something clever, but it will always work that if you get it to y equals mx plus b and compare slopes, compare y-intercepts, you can understand what's going on. You can solve it no matter what it looks like, no matter whether it's fractions or messy equations, whether it's one equation or two equations, it will keep working. So we love that. There's so few opportunities like that on the SAT. So we want to take advantage of the ones we get. I hope I'm stressing it enough. This is a very important question. Cool. Are there any questions on this for now? Again, I don't expect you to fully remember it, but it's right here in our list for week 4, class 4. Number of solutions, no x squared. That's this situation. There's no x squared because the lines are intersecting. And right below it, you see where we're about to go. The number of solutions for an x squared situation. So let's take a look. And I'm very proud of this question here because it is almost identical in the way it looks to this one. So there's some content here. If you feel like you already know how to solve this, feel free to tune me out for a minute or two and just go for it. But I will talk it through for those of you who are looking at this and are just like, I have no hope of anything close to an answer here. So I will talk it through because I want you to see it the way I do. That if X, then Y. What am I seeing? If the number of solutions, right? I see that right away. No solutions. They're not asking for the solutions. They're asking for the number, or they're talking about the number. Then I'm going to ask, is it an x or an x squared, a line or a quadratic? It's a quadratic. So I might think for a second, can I use Desmos? But I don't know. There's too much going on. I don't know what's going on. But I do know that there's another option, which is what's known as the discriminant. I hope I'm spelling that right, which is b squared minus 4ac. That seems like a random string of letters, but remember, that's the part of the quadratic formula that is underneath the radical. So in the quadratic formula, x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the discriminant is that part. And that part tells us the number of solutions for a quadratic, for a parabola, the number of x-intercepts, without having to worry about what the actual x-intercepts are. And so they love this because it's very meta. It's very like high math. But again, I like it as a teacher because it's predictable. And I know this feels hard, but if we just memorize a few things, we can do these. So what I memorize is that when b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, then a parabola or a quadratic will have no solutions. And if you have trouble remembering that, remember again, this discriminant idea is part of the quadratic formula. So if b squared minus 4ac is negative, then in the quadratic formula, you are taking the square root of a negative number. You can't do that. You can't take square roots of negatives. Not possible. Do it in the calculator, you're going to get an error, or you'll get an imaginary number. And there are no imaginary numbers on the SAT. So that's why if this one piece of the formula is negative, it breaks the formula. So that's where we want to start. But in order to use this formula, I need an A, B, and a C. And I can only get that if I have a quadratic in standard form. So I have to get this to look like a normal quadratic. So this is, again, tapping into my robot brain. Whenever you have an x squared, you really want to get it in that form and then do stuff with it. So let's kind of start. I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to get 3x plus 6 minus 7 equals 4 minus 5x squared plus b. And right now, everything I'm writing down is exactly what I would write on my scratch paper on the real test. I do not trust myself. There's too many things going on. So let's combine these. So 3x minus 1 is 4 minus 5x squared plus b minus 3x. There's no x term here, so that's going to go off on its own. Plus 1. 0 equals negative 5x squared minus 3x plus 5 plus b. So this is ax squared plus bx plus c. Ax squared, there's the a, plus bx, there's my b, and I know there's a b here. Again, we're doing the same thing that we did before, right? B, they're using that letter even though it doesn't mean what we normally think it means. That's okay. Just follow the rules. And c is, again, all of this. The c term is going to be the one that has no x's attached at all. There's no x's attached to the 5 or the b. So unless I've made a careless algebra mistake, we're on track here. Now this goes in here, the a, the b, and the c. So b squared, that's negative 3 squared minus 4. A is negative 5. C is this whole thing. So parentheses, very important. 5 plus B is less than 0. Okay. Now, again, if X, then Y. My robot brain says, hey, I got a thing. It's got a lot of numbers and it's got one letter. I should probably try to get the letter alone, right? That's not a complicated idea. That's not something that's specific to this question. That is just a general rule in algebra. If I've got something and I can get a letter alone, it's not a bad idea. So let's do it. 9. This is going to be plus 20 times 5 plus b is less than 0. So 9 plus 20 times 5 is 100 plus b, 20b is less than 0. Combine those. That's 109 plus 20b is less than 0. Subtract 20b, my handwriting is getting terrible, is less than negative 109. Divide by 20, cross it out. B is less than negative 109 divided by 20. Now I can't, that's already too many spaces for me to answer in this blank, right? Because you can only put 6 characters for negative numbers, including the negative. So this is where I reach for my calculator and turn this into a decimal. Negative 109 divided by 20 is negative 5.45. Now, is that the answer? Because they're asking for K. What's the deal here? Well, this is again where my kind of stupid, dumb summary robot brain takes over, and I'm like, okay, they're saying B is less than K, and they want the greatest possible value of K. Well, B is less than negative 5.45, so B is less than K kind of matches up real nice with that. So I might mark for review. Maybe there's a way for me to check this, but this would be a case where, yeah, negative 5.45 is going to work. And some of you guys are trying to type it in. I'll let you. So there you go. It doesn't matter, but that is it. So this is hard. To be clear, this is hard. But again, it's that predictable kind of hard. And we're going to talk as we get through the next couple of weeks, as we get closer and closer to that SAT, we're going to start to talk very seriously about what kinds of questions are must get questions. Where are the places where we know we can add points? That's where we're going to really focus our attention. We're still trying to figure that out here. There might be a topic that for some reason, surprisingly, you're really good at that you just never would have expected. So try to cast a wide net. We're going to do that next week too, when we talk about geometry and statistics and some other kind of more obscure grammar rules, some things that don't get a lot of attention, but it might be an easy place for points for some of you. But for now, we're still trying to figure out those places where maybe we can program you to think a little less, but still solve some very hard questions. This is hard. This is tedious. This is just annoying, but it's predictable. If I talk about the number of solutions, I have a plan of how I'm going to solve it with this discriminant. If I'm got a quadratic and I need to solve it in any way, I'm going to get it into ax squared plus bx plus c. If I have an equation and it's got a random variable, I'm going to solve for that variable, right? Everything that I did here was very textbook, very routine, and that's good. I wish I could use more like plug points into equation strategies, and I am in a way with this discriminant, but is sometimes we just got to know the stuff. And again, this is right here in our list, number of solutions x squared. So these two things together go really well for this week. If you're looking to do some math, you might do badly score-wise on these two, but I think even if you're getting 50% right, that's success here. That means you're starting to learn those ideas, and the lessons to these things are really good. So look, there's a beautiful little lesson. Again, you can watch me on double speed if you want, but this is a great review of everything we just did here, which I don't expect you to have memorized right away. It's complex, but hopefully we're seeing some bright spots, some opportunities for success. That's all I've got for today in terms of questions. And just to reiterate, this set for next week, if you're trying to get through number 4 here, you don't need to do all of these things. If you can do 10, that's amazing. That's great. And review them thoroughly, but also make sure that if you haven't done all of 1 and 2, you're going back and doing that too. So those are really important. So make sure you're doing a lot of work, a little bit each day. We are 1 month from the SAT. This is where, if you've been procrastinating, you got to step it up. If you have questions, let me know, guys. You can stick around for a couple minutes and ask questions. Otherwise, you are free to go. I do have a couple minutes for questions. I have to run at 7, but I have a little bit of time before that. But thank you for hopefully, yeah, a good lesson that got you some points. Put this back up in case people are still absorbing.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I don't think anyone needs me to. Oh, Neil, do you have a question quick on this one or something else?
Yeah, I was wondering how if we bookmark the questions in the Satel vision, can you see them later? Or are they gone?
I can see them. Yeah, yeah.
I was wondering how to get to them.
Oh, can you see them later? You're asking.
Yeah.
Uh,
Then can you go back to the vocabulary question? I would like to screenshot it and review it.
yes, I can do that. And then, Ansh, you have a question about the other passage. I can do that. Oh, and remember, Neil, the video will be published tomorrow, so you can also always go back that way. That's why I don't have a way for you guys to do it because the video is there. But let me. The vocab question was this one. Yes. Is this the right one? Yeah, there we go.
All right. Yeah, the twists got me on this one.
That was the intent. Yeah. So sometimes one of the perks of my job is I get to just torture people a little bit in a non bad way, just mentally torture. But that's what the SAT is doing. So if you can start to notice it, you'll be able to save these points in a lot of cases. And yes, there is an exercise on these twisted relationships ones assigned for this week. You good? Can I flip to another one? Someone else had another question.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. So, Ant, you're asking about this one, and you're asking about A versus C. And I agree with you that both seem to say things that are not directly talked about in the passage. But that's going to happen with these kinds of questions, the ones that are supporting and weakening the passage. Because think about what they're saying in the question itself, right? Which finding from the researcher study, if true, would most directly weaken the author's claim? So we're giving the result of the study, which the passage doesn't really give, but we're giving information alongside it. So we're allowed to have some new ideas. And that's, yeah, that's bad in other types of reading passages, but it's okay on these ones. And it's okay to an extent on the logic questions where we're asked what logically completes the passage and we have that blank at the end of the passage. And that's because the things that we should pick, they might be technically new, but they follow from what we were talking about, right? They're not random, they're related. And so it becomes less about this the specific thing they're putting in there and more about that again that relationship that they're getting to. And here in C, they're not really contrasting the two things. And I would really want them to do that. I'd be happy if they said the upright posture recalled fewer details about the film's dialogue, while the hunched participants scored very well on the film's dialogue, right? Like if they said that, then that would have been a great choice because then that's flipping our dumb summary. Now the hunched ones are good and the upright ones are bad. But it just didn't quite get there. And A is just a different way of saying that this conclusion is wrong and that the posture doesn't matter at all. Does that answer your question? Feel free to unmute if that's easier. Okay, very good.